I've got Mercedes Sarmini, who's the most expert about keeping flowers in the vase, and she is absolutely matching the roses she's brought in with her today.
Oh,
Everything, the clothes, the hair, everything. Can you imagine?
happy Valentine's Day, and the colour in question is red. Red wine? No, oops, no, I mean roses.
Yes,
Red roses. They've made a song about that. Red,
yes.
red wine.
The roses are looking beautiful. They're long stem roses with deep green leaves, not a sign of black spot or any disease. Beautifully, beautifully formed, and she's teamed them with the great cycad leaves.
Yes, now I've done that deliberately because the colour green as a backdrop makes your cut flowers pop. Another colour that makes your cut flowers pop is also purple.
Okay.
But
because you think about it, on the colour wheel, red and green are opposites in colour, so that would explain why they pop.
yes,
Yeah, and they're next to each other in purple, so that's another.
unfortunately, you know, opposites don't attract long term; they do short term.
Well, let's go into the heritage or history of the rose, which is all about you know, even Shakespeare talked about the rose, and we know that famous line, the rose is one of the most famous and beloved flowers.
Yes, and they made a movie actually, The Rose, and leading actress was Bette Midler. If we're talking movies, and how many songs have they written about the rose? And speaking of the rose, she is a Ms. You've got to cut the stems down below on an angle. And Valentine's Day is all about red roses, but it's also about, oh my God, you know, like they're so expensive and they don't last long. And I'm going to be sharing with the listeners today why they don't last long. Now, firstly, a lot of it is imported from overseas. They come from India, Colombia, Zimbabwe, and the list goes on. So they go through quarantine and they're gassed
with bromide, bromide gas, which is not really good. Yeah.
No, not at all. So when they come out of the chamber, the poor thing, God love her, you know, she's in coma, she's lost her odour, which is a nice odour.
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah, so then she comes to the markets. The growers are just so busy, you know, to treat it, but it's the responsibility of the florist to then treat it. And how do we treat it? Well, scalding is number one on the list. What is scalding? What's that all about, Mercedes? Well, scalding, we've got a slip on the heels, which is the diagonal cut down the bottom, and boiling water. So what scalding does to the rose is that it burps it.
Oh, okay.
And you will visually see that as the bubbles come to the surface. When the bubbles stop in the boiling water, that is an indication that you've got to take your stem out of the water, boiling water, and put it in deep, warm water, because warm water travels faster up the stem and hits the head, but your water needs to be treated with flower food.
Flower food.
Yes, and as you're scalding, make sure that you're protecting your bloom's head, because the hot moisture from the boiling water can sometimes damage your petals. So make sure that they're covered, they're protected in the process of scalding.
Okay. You can actually make your own flower food with a teaspoon of sugar and some bleach.
Well, correct, Marianne. The formula is 5 litres of burped water. What does burped water mean?
Well, we all know that. It's water that's been boiled or been standing for a couple of hours.
4 hours.
4 hours.
So once that step is done, you add 25 litres of bleach. Mils, sorry. Jesus, not litres. Oh, I've only had 3 hours sleep, so
preparing all those roses. I knew you'd be busy.
Am I looking fabulous? Like 3 hours sleep. Oh, you're such a blossom there, Marianne. So the formula again is 5 litres of burped water, 25 mils of bleach, 25 mils of vinegar, white vinegar, and 10 teaspoons of raw sugar. And that mixture then gives you extra kilometres, which means extra vase life when it comes to your cut flowers.
Wow, that's a good tip. You can make up the 5 litres, because would you need to change the water every day with that flower food?
Good question. The difference between having normal water and flower food water is that you don't have to replace the water every day if it's normal water. With flower food water, you add to it every day, and on the 3rd day you replace it. But flower food water can only stand for 7 days if you've got any extra flower food water. And if you haven't used it, your lawn loves it. So don't discard of it down the kitchen sink. Just feed your lawn with it.
Okay. Gee, that's a really good garden tip. Thank you, Mercedes.
Oh, well, my pleasure.
You've been on fire these days.
Now, the family
Rosaceae,
tribe,
yeah.
it's a medium-sized family compared to the Asteraceae family. And it does have a nickname, Rosa and Rosie, and it's the world's #1 selling cut flower, not just on Valentine's Day, every day of the year. And if you're into your celebrities, Madonna loves roses, so does Katy Perry, Paris Hilton, J-Lo, and Sir Elton John.
Wow, that's a nice celebrity list. Now, there's a Christian mythology where a rose bush was also said to have grown at the side of Christ's death.
Yes.
And well, it's been grown for 5,000 years in China, apparently, because that's where it came from.
She's Chinese.
Yes,
Yep,
she's Chinese.
Yep. And Elton John, not Elton John, David Bowie, My Little China Girl. Do you think you might be referring to the rose?
Oh, I didn't realise he probably was.
Maybe indeed.
Yes.
Now she's 2,500 species, and she's the national emblem for the USA.
Wow.
And state emblem for New York and Oklahoma. And speaking of national cut flower, for the UK, Slovenia, Maldives, Iraq, Iran, Cyprus, and the Czech Republic. So she gets around, Miss Rose. And look, if she's not scented, what I want to also share with the listeners is that most cut flowers that are not scented are for 2 reasons. They've come from overseas and she's been gassed, the poor thing. And the other reason is greenhouse. Now, there are certain varieties that greenhouse does hold that do have a scent, and they are the lilac roses and the yellow roses.
But not the red roses for the greenhouses. And
No.
I would imagine on a special day like Valentine's Day, they would be having greenhouse roses just to keep up with the
Of course.
demand. Yeah.
Now, if you want to know if your special one has invested good money in you, the bigger the head of the rose, the more money he's spent. So, so smaller head means he's a bit
A bit on the stingy side.
Yeah, thrifty side. Big heads mean and scream, oh my God, he spent a lot of money on you this Valentine's Day. So
wow.
Colombian roses all the way, Valentine's Day. But then again, you know what, Marianne, it's the thought that counts.
Yes.
You know, one single rose will do it with a bit of chocolate and a balloon.
Yeah.
And you won't be sleeping on the couch tonight, you'll be in bed.
Okay, jolly good. Okay. Now, should we talk about some of the colours, what they mean? Because we all know that red, the lover's rose, passion, and white is humility and innocence, and yellow, friendship and joy.
And speaking of colour, peach.
Oh, don't know that one.
That means let's make this a memorable Valentine's Day.
I don't see too many peaches.
No, not at all. So, I mean, you could add that with your red roses.
And they would go well.
And speaking of the colour red, it increases your appetite.
Of course.
And it increases your heart rate, and it inflates areas of interest. But we won't go there because that's X-rated.
It's true. It's true. Now, there's lots of Greek mythology associated with the rose. Let's talk about Aphrodite and Venus, goddesses of love. In mythology, the rose is associated with these 2 lovely goddesses who were often depicted adorned with roses around their heads, feet, and neck. It's also said that a rose bush grew within the pool of blood spilled from Aphrodite's slain lover Adonis.
Oh my God, sounds like a lot of jealousy in that story.
Absolutely.
Let's bring it up
a notch.
A notch with the harems. The Middle Easterns back in the day used to exchange roses as a secret means of communication between lovers who were not allowed to express their love to one another. Yeah. And speaking of harems, I mean, they used to have a minimum of 99 women for each harem. Minimum.
I'm gobsmacked.
And let's talk about the cousins. I was very surprised to know that this cousin is related to Miss Rose, strawberries.
Oh, I'm surprised too.
Yeah. And apples are related.
Yes.
Pears, apricots, plums, cherries, peaches, raspberries, and almonds was another one that I was very surprised. to know that she's related to as well.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who grow their own roses and are probably thinking, well, if it wasn't for the heat, they'd probably have a lovely bunch of roses, because it's been a terrible, terrible, terrible heat around Australia. And
that's the reason why I'm on fire. And let's wrap it up with the energy properties, because I know all the listeners are into that. This Valentine's Day, Miss Rose is going to help you attract love. It will help you enhance your passion and your romance, and she will also increase your motivation, your self-healing, and she will also help you to open up your chakra, because speaking of chakra, it is a heart and root chakra.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned is the June birth month flower, and 15th wedding anniversary flower.
Indeed. So if you're together for 15 years,
good on you.
This Valentine's Day, it's red, not wine, roses.
Roses. Okie dokie. Well, thank you once again, Mercedes, for your wonderful knowledge about flowers.
It's always a pleasure.